I think Americans hate inflation.
That certainly was
They hate
part of it.
inflation, they hate riots, and they hate black women.
They don't
and they hate trans people.
Oh, God, John, we're not.
We need a complete and total shutdown on woke actors running their mouths until we can figure out what the heck is going on. A left-wing actor's interview with Bill Maher goes viral, more DEI insanity in the Los Angeles Fire Department, and are right-wing influencers promoting Andrew Tate again? All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, across our media, and across our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, like I mentioned, we've got to check out the latest interview that the liberal-leaning but independent-minded comedian and talk show host Bill Maher did over on his podcast Club Random, featuring the actor Jon Cryer, who you might know as having played Alan on 2.5 Men, co-starring alongside Charlie Sheen. I used to love that show as a kid. And I didn't know much about Jon as an individual, and he does seem like a nice guy, but boy, when this conversation got political, it quickly turned into the kind of cringe-inducing woke brain rot on display that I think perfectly embodies what's gone wrong in the Democratic Party. We're going to take a look at this first bit where Jon seems so afraid of being offensive that he won't even condemn like rampant misogyny in other cultures. Take a listen to this.
You know, there are places in Western civilizations that are like run not by Western standards.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean they're just different.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there are cultural enclaves everywhere.
Right, but we should agree that women should be able to wear what they want.
Yes.
If you don't agree with that, then you're not a liberal to begin with.
Well,
women,
yes.
Call me a crazy liberal, but I think women should have freedom.
I agree as well.
Okay.
I agree as well.
But they don't in these neighborhoods. It was the 60 Minutes piece that they did.
One could argue that that women don't have the freedom to dress where they are in dress how they want to dress in many places. They used to get catcalled all the time. They used to, there was
used to.
Well,
we're talking about now.
Well,
yeah, a lot of shit used to happen, but what's going on now in the world? Would you really want to have your wife live in Gaza or any place where I mean before
war-torn strip of desert?
Even before the war, where she would have to cover up.
Well, again, that's not. I don't live there. I'm not. It's not my culture.
And you won't judge it.
I'm not going to judge it. No, but again, this is not
crazy woke to me.
Okay.
That's where it all went off the rails.
Yeah, Bill's right. That is crazy woke. When you're supposedly a feminist and like a progressive champion of women, but you're so afraid of maybe being called Islamophobic or racist or something by some stupid people on the internet, you won't condemn women's freedom blatantly being restricted. You simultaneously have to pretend you're a feminist and care about women, but also are kind of entrapped by this cultural relativism that we see on the left, where they have to pretend all cultures are created equal. And, well, I'm not going to judge them. Yeah, no, I do believe women should be free. So you'd condemn this Muslim culture where they don't let women drive or show their faces. Well, I can't condemn their cultural differences. No, what? Not all cultures are created equal. And being honest about that is part of being a liberal or a classical liberal in any real sense, and supporting individual liberty and freedom for women and for anybody, whether it's a Muslim country violating it, some far-right fascist country violating it. If you actually believe in these principles, you have to actually apply them across the board and say, no, I oppose that, I condemn that. Not just be so afraid of being called some sort of bigot for opposing this insanity that you can't even stand up for your most basic values and principles. I mean, that to me is just a microcosm of everything that's wrong with the woke elite, where they're so afraid of offending the most extreme people from their own tribe that they can't even stand up for the parts of their values that are like actually correct. It's kind of maddening. And I totally sympathize with Bill Maher, how he wanted to just pull his hair out in response to this. I did as well watching this. Now wait till you hear this guy's explanation for why Democrats lost the election.
The super woke, that's like, I'm not woke enough for them. Yeah, but like, I think I had it right. Like that kind of stuff is what lost the election for the Democrats. It's in all.
Maybe part of it. I don't know. I think a lot.
They have polling on it.
Well, I think it's inflation. I think Americans hate inflation.
That certainly was
They hate
part
inflation. They hate riots, and they hate black women.
They don't
and they hate trans
oh
people.
God, John, we're not
Dude,
gonna.
they just spent hundreds of millions
They
of dollars
don't hate
demonizing
black
trans people, and that is disgusting.
Yeah,
That
we
is-
shouldn't talk politics.
Okay, we shouldn't. We
I mean,
shouldn't.
this is-
Great. We don't
Yeah.
have to.
I just got dumber listening to that. If this is where your level of political analysis is, maybe sit this one out, champ. I mean, there's so many problems here. He's not wrong. Inflation was a huge problem. Inflation absolutely was a motivating factor, though throughout the interview, he kept framing it as if it was some immovable force that happened and Democrats just got unlucky. Inflation happened while they were in charge and voters took it out on them. Well, no, they also made it worse. The first thing Biden did was come in and pass massive, wasteful, multi-trillion-dollar stimulus bills that made it worse. So it's not this unlucky thing that just happened while they were in office and they had to pay the price, but that's how he frames it throughout this entire podcast, which I listened to while making my usual eggs and English muffin this morning. But the part where he says America just hates black women, and that's why Kamala lost. Oh my gosh, I can't believe they're still saying this. This is obviously not true. This same America elected Barack Obama, people like Michelle Obama or Oprah, or many other American black women have very high approval ratings with the public, and Kamala lost ground with a lot of minority voters and women. This idea that it's all just sexism, racism, blah, 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 is such a cheap deflection that's so tired and so old at this point, especially considering that if Kamala Harris had been a white man, she wouldn't have been on the ticket in the first place. I mean, she was only made Biden's vice president in part because she's a woman. Biden said that. That's not speculation. That's not an inference. It's something he openly said. So the audacity here is wild. And then to claim that Americans voted for Trump over Kamala just because they hate trans people and that they spent hundreds of millions of dollars attacking trans people with transphobia. Well, hang on a second. Let me play you the ad that he's talking about that Trump ran over and over again that was effective with voters. And you tell me if you think it's hating trans people.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
It's hard to believe, but it's true. Even the liberal media was shocked Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners and illegal aliens.
Every transgender inmate would have access.
Kamala's for they, them. President Trump is for you.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
I don't think that's hateful at all. It's saying that Kamala Harris's position on trans issues, wanting taxpayer-funded surgeries and procedures for prisoners and illegal immigrants, is crazy and not something most people support. And that's not a question of hating trans people. It's a question of not wanting to give cosmetic surgeries paid for on the tax dime to people who say they're trans, even if they're in jail for double homicide. Like, that's just a common sense question of resource allocation and priorities. It's not some sort of hateful thing. Many trans people would agree that that's ridiculous. Now, the thing about Kamala's for they, them, and Trump is for you is just a quip. It's just a clever line. Like, to suggest that anybody who found that ad relatable hates trans people is totally ridiculous and just out of touch with reality. And I mean, it's hard to say how widespread this sentiment is that you hear from kind of the woke elite, like the Jon Cryers of the world. But if this is the message they're taking from the election, they'll lose again. Some of them seem to be having more introspection than this. But the ones that aren't, if they go with this approach, good luck. Enjoy the fat stack of L's that's going to continue coming your way, my dude. Yikes. Take a listen to this next bit.
And now, because the Democrats did what I told them not to do and went to crazy town way too often, now you blew it. You blew it. You blew it.
I did not. But go ahead.
Lost everything.
Wow.
So I have no one to champion and defend my issues.
But I would
democracy
say,
in the
I would say
environment.
all of the wokeness that outraged you so much was Republican framing, was right-wing media framing.
Oh,
that
God.
I mean, again,
Please, John,
yes,
that's
I
not
am
the
telling you
case.
this.
No,
I am. Yes, that
it's
is the
not
case.
framing.
That is the case.
I do
Bill
this
Maher.
I do this for a living.
Okay.
I have a whole staff to vet this.
Oh my gosh. He's saying that the Democratic Party's shift leftward and the rise of wokeness is all just right-wing framing and propaganda and basically isn't real. And what that makes that so funny is that he literally just did it like 10 minutes before in this very interview with the identity politics and the victim script that he invoked to defend Kamala Harris's dreadful campaign and her massive loss. He did the exact thing he's now saying is just right-wing framing. And look, does Fox News and right-wing media make the most out of some of these stories? Do I make a lot of them out of it sometimes for entertainment value? Yes, that is true. But it is an objective fact the Democratic Party has moved leftward on the issues, particularly social issues. And the official institutional position of the Democratic Party is things like sex self-ID. You can change your legal sex to whatever you feel like, and use prisons and changing rooms and locker rooms accordingly. That's in the Equality Act that basically every elected Democrat supports. We all lived through 2020 and the hyper-woke era. And it is true to some extent that Harris and others kind of backed away from it a little bit in this presidential campaign, but the party's ultimate positions haven't changed much. And you can't erase years of history with a couple of months of no longer talking about your craziest ideas. I mean, one of the Biden-Harris administration's first things they did was institute an executive order ordering all levels of the federal government to evaluate and institute DEI practices, which is peak wokeness, peak far left ideas about race, identity, sexuality, and gender. You can't deny that this is real. I mean, you can, but you're just gaslighting us, or you yourself are the victim of framing, which is really, I guess, just either propaganda or just being totally disconnected with reality. It's maddening to hear this. This was actually the worst bit of the whole interview that kind of just made me officially discredit Jon Cryer as any sort of political commentator. Take a listen.
Affirmation. Okay, have the operation.
Okay, you understand, first of all, that the most prevalent gender affirming surgery is breast removal, tissue removal for cisgender male boys. Okay,
but
so
we're not
understand,
talking about that.
Okay, but the reason I'm bringing it up is because if people are okay with people are always saying we don't want young people making those decisions for lifelong decisions when they're still very young. I mean, that seems to be what people are.
Well, that's where Europe, where all the liberal countries that we used to be aligned with on this issue a few years ago.
Oh my gosh. So this was his talking point after Bill Maher pointed out another area where Democrats have gone incredibly extreme, all in on children being able to get irreversible medical transitions and sex changes. And his argument was, well, actually, yes, minors get double mastectomies for gender affirming care, but did you know cis male boys get breast tissue removed if they have conditions where they're growing breasts and they're not supposed to? That's not the same thing, my dude. That's not remotely comparable. Because is it a similar procedure? Yes, but it's being done for an entirely different purpose. It's not being done to convince somebody or that they appear as or pass as the opposite sex. It's being done to address a developmental issue that is abnormal and is in need of correction. It's like taking these two things, similar procedure for different purposes, is kind of like saying that because there are actually some medical instances where a doctor would need to remove someone's limb, or they would need to amputate a leg, for example, whether it's because of extreme diabetes or necrosis or some form of medical conditions. Like, I won't get into the science of that. I'm not an expert, but there's some legitimate times where a doctor needs to amputate a limb. Well, I think we would all agree that a doctor shouldn't amputate a limb because a person identifies as a disabled amputee and wants to be disabled. Now, you could say, but you support them giving that service to some people, and that's actually the most common. So if you believe they should be allowed to do that, they must be allowed to do this. No, That's not how medicine works. The purpose and goal of a procedure is deeply relevant to whether that procedure is appropriate, respectable, legitimate, and needed. You can't separate these things. But this is what they try to do, and it's a very silly talking point that to me suggests a lack of real nuance or depth on this issue. He seems to have just kind of embodied and embedded into him a lot of the talking points, surface level talking points from the internet or wherever, from progressive talking heads, but not have grappled with these issues at any deep level. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone has to be a political commentator or scholar, but if you don't have the depth to go there on these issues, it's probably best to just not talk about them at all. I wanted to talk about this because I found it interesting as kind of a microcosm of where the Democratic Party is right now and where the American left is. You have some people like Bill Maher, who's very much a liberal, hates Trump, is not Republican or right-wing in his actual beliefs, with a couple issues where he has more right-leaning beliefs, but by and large, voted for Kamala. He's a proud Democrat, but he's over the woke stuff. He wants to return to sanity, moderation, and normalcy. And then you seem to have some people in the Democratic Party, the elites, the Jon Cryer, many of the journalists and commentators who are still all in on this. And they've got a little bit of a civil war or a struggle going on within their crowd. And it will be very interesting to me to see who wins, because I have my own intuitions about who should win and which would be better for the party. But it seems that they have some figuring out to do and some argumentation among themselves that still needs to be done, so they can actually figure out what they stand for, what they believe, which of these paths they're going to go down, and then let the American people pass their judgment on it. But what do you guys think? Did this interview make you want to pull your hair out as much as it did for me? Do let me know in the comments, and do hit that like button while you're at it, and make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Now, we got to talk about DEI initiatives in firefighting, which is not a sentence I should really even have to say, but it is bubbling up to the surface of the online conversation because of the tragedies going on in Los Angeles right now, and the fact that the Los Angeles Fire Department appears to have gone all in on the DEI craze. Now, to be clear, from everything I've read, they're doing a good job down there. I haven't seen any issues that are attributable to incompetence among the firefighters in LA. And they certainly couldn't have stopped this disaster from happening. It's because of much bigger picture issues. But I think it's fair for people, when they see stuff like what I'm about to show you, to question what the heck is going on inside of these institutions and why anyone thinks it's a good idea to have them continue to stray away from meritocracy. Here's a clip of the deputy chief of the fire department for Los Angeles, who is a woman of color, in an interview she did with a progressive media outlet a couple years back. Take a listen to this.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better.
We'll get to the second bit of this, which is somehow actually worse. But first off, no, babe. I and everyone else don't give two craps about whether everyone else with common sense, at least, about the identity of who's showing up to save me from the flames. I care that they're able to save me. They're strong enough to lift me up if I've passed out from the smoke. I don't care if they're gay like I am. I care if they can save me or not, if they know what they're doing, if they're in shape, if they're strong enough to do the job. Who on earth cares about the representation of the people doing EMS? Now, look, I think anybody should be open to all. They should have high standards. Here's what you got to do. And if a woman can meet those standards, by all means, participate. I don't want it to just be only men. And certainly race is irrelevant to the conversation of who's qualified to do these jobs entirely. Gender, because of the reality of the differences between the biological sexes, there's more to be discussed there. But race is totally irrelevant. But first and foremost, who cares? I mean, California has this whole thing where they're trying to make their firefighting force less white and less male. No, just make sure they can save people and do their jobs. And I don't trust that this woman could pick me up and lift me out of a burning building. Maybe she could, but I have my doubts. And her joke about that very question does not reassure me. Take a look.
Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
Not the woke people victim blaming burn victims. Now, the best possible interpretation of what she just said is that she's joking and doesn't mean that literally. Because if she actually meant that seriously, like, well, it's the man's problem for being lying down, then you're in the wrong line of work, babe. But I will give her the benefit of the doubt and assume that is a joke. Still, I mean, you should be reassuring people, no, women who are in the LA fire department still have to meet the same strength requirements as men. They still have to be able to lift a grown 200-pound person out of a burning building before we put them in those roles. So we're about gender equality in terms of equality of access and opportunity, but we still have these high standards. That reassurance, I'm not getting it. Are you getting it? Would you trust this person? Me? No. And it's not because of the color of her skin or her gender, although that's a more legitimate question to ask. I just want to make sure that people in these positions are there because of merit and qualifications, and that we're not lowering standards with this DEI craze and nonsense in matters of literal life and death. You want to talk about making the post office more diverse or whatever? I guess let's have that conversation. Keep it out of the shit where people's lives are at stake. I feel like that's not too much to ask. Again, to be clear, I'm not saying DEI caused the LA fires. I'm not saying the fire department is doing anything but their best. And I'm sure many of them have been heroic in the way they've responded and are putting their lives on the line. But people are just raising this question because of the timing here. And it's a valid question to ask. Because again, if you ask me, DEI goals and initiatives have no place in fire departments or anything else where people's lives are at stake. And I just think that's common sense. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you think of that video. Am I being punked? Is Ashton Kutcher about to stick out his head and say, "You've been punked"? Because that's what it feels like when I see like stuff like this. Like, welcome to the year of our Lord 2025, people. I kind of hate it here. Okay. Up next, we got to talk about something that's happening with the right online that I have some serious qualms with. Right-wing influencers, at least some of them, most notably Benny Johnson, the massive podcast host and YouTuber and Twitter personality, seem to be rehabbing Andrew Tate, the alt-right, alpha male, extremely toxic personality who rose to prominence a few years ago, but then had an enormous fall from grace after he faced a litany of criminal prosecutions and accusations and allegations about harming women in too many ways to list, as well as his descent in his commentary into rank anti-Semitism, homophobia that's really just nasty, and unhinged takes all around, truly saying some of the worst things imaginable about women on just the most regular basis. Originally, when he rose to the scene, I thought there were parts of his message that were redeemable, and I thought he was speaking to some kind of void that was being left in masculinity and men, and maybe other people out there are still doing that, but he, to me, went toxic, radioactive a long time ago. But now he's announced some sort of trollish, unserious run for prime minister in the United Kingdom or something. Obviously, I'm not up to date on UK politics, but so some people are now uncritically promoting him. And like I mentioned, Benny Johnson is doing that, the right-wing YouTuber with millions and millions and millions of subscribers. Benny tweeted, "Announcement, Andrew Tate will join The Benny Show live tomorrow to discuss Trump's political persecution, plus New York City show trial sentencing and the political future of Top G. Tune in live 11 a.m. Eastern." To give you a good idea of who Andrew Tate is and how serious he is as a person, he replied to this and said, "All the crybabies are going to cry even more on the stream. Moral grandstanding, squeaky clean babies don't win wars. That's how they got subjugated by homos and Yeah, he seems lovely and thoughtful. Now remember, guys, Benny Johnson is supposed to be a conservative Christian man who believes that men are protectors of women and in traditional family values. That's how he portrays himself to his audience of millions of people. But here he is, uncritically uplifting and promoting a self-avowed pimp.
I was all about trying to get paid. Like my whole I used sex as a tool to make women love me so they'd obey me and live in my house and make me money. That's what I wanted. So I was a pimp in that sense.
That's how it goes. Slap, slap, grab, choke, shut up, bitch, sex. These are the basic moves of a pimp.
Who has been very open about how he made his money as a pimp and a pornographer who tricked and coerced women into doing pornography for him that he profited off of, and who has been very credibly accused in the UK with evidence including disturbing voice notes and text messages from Tate himself of sexually assaulting or physically assaulting multiple women. Like, this is not a good guy.
Am I a bad person? Because the more you didn't like it, the more I enjoyed it. I loved how much you hated it. Turned me on. Why am I like that? Why?
Whilst we were having sex, he put his hand on my throat and strangled me until I lost consciousness. But he was still having sex with me when I kind of came back around again.
I am one of the most dangerous men on this planet. Sometimes you forget exactly how lucky you were to get by me. Are you seriously so offended I strangled you a little bit? You didn't pass out.
But he kind of kept saying, I own you, you belong to me, like threatening to kill me.
Chill the out. Jesus Christ, I thought you were cool.
It's disgusting to me that right-wing influencers would embrace him like this just to get clicks. Like, for the picture that he put with this has a lib in the reflection of their glasses just screaming. And look, I'm not above trolling or laughing at like far left woke people, but you shouldn't be embracing the literal worst that humanity has to offer and betraying all the values you stand for just to upset liberal people. Then you have no principles or standing whatsoever. And I guess, I mean, Benny Johnson literally got fired from BuzzFeed for a mass plagiarism scandal. So it's not like he was upstanding in his ethics and professionalism before this, but this is something of a new low for me. I mean, I guess the bar is on the floor, but he still managed to trip over it and just plummet to new lows with this one. Now, when I tweeted about this, I got some legitimate pushback that I did want to engage with. One person tweeted at me, as disgusting as he is, Tate is making a run for prime minister. Conditions are such that it should be no surprise if the king dissolves parliament, creating openings for dark horse candidates like Tate. Benny is just being an actual journalist. And here's my response. It would be valid, and I don't know enough about UK politics to know if there really is an opening or if you can just become prime minister without being an MP first. I actually just don't know how it works, so I won't speak to that. But what I will say is this. If Benny was going to interview Andrew Tate and actually press him on his disturbing record, on his alarming beliefs, and have some sort of scrutinizing conversation of people who want to hold political power, I'd support that. I support people interviewing the worst dictators in the world, members of terror groups, even extreme politicians, hateful bigots. There is value in that. But what there isn't value in, and what it's not okay to do, is to just give softball interviews to terrible people, use them for clicks just to trigger the left, and then in doing so promote them and get them even more followers and influence that they then use to spread their horrible, hateful views and ideas. That is not okay. That's grifting, not real journalism. I watched Benny's interview with him, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, something I've been excited to say on this program, well, since really the inception of the program, and someone who I think will deliver absolute, profound takes on what is happening right now, because he himself has been the victim of state-sponsored incarceration, lawfare, and abuses of justice for political reasons. We're going to ask all of these things of Andrew Tate, who joins us live. Andrew, we have a special guest that is joining us right now, somebody who noticed that you would be on our show and wanted to say hello. This is the attorney for President Trump, somebody who has been a fighter for the America First Party. Her name is Alina Habba, and she joins us live right now.
Hi.
Hello, Alina.
Hi.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. I'm a big fan.
Well, nice
Big
to meet
fan.
you. I'm a fan. You're the one saving Trump. You're doing more important work than me.
America, not just Trump. And I agree with everything you just said. And I think that you're anger is the same that President Trump has.
He didn't bring up the SA allegations. He didn't play the voicemail and make him react to it. He didn't talk about all the horrific anti-Semitic things that Tate has tweeted. They just did this shock jock conversation about Trump and politics. And he treated him like he's a normal political commentator. He's not. He's a deeply controversial, hateful figure that if the right had any standards, he'd be considered radioactive and toxic. But increasingly, the online right has no standards, except perhaps double standards. What do you guys think? That's my honest take. I do get frustrated with this kind of thing because these types with no real standards or integrity, the Benny Johnsons of the world, get millions and millions and millions of subs. And then the people who kind of try to maintain that integrity and honesty and nuance, like myself, it's an uphill battle and we're getting there, but nowhere near that same level of virality and interaction. So it is somewhat frustrating, and that's probably creeping into my tone and how I view these incidents and these developments for sure. But do let me know what you think in the comments below, even if you disagree with me. If you're somehow still a fan of Andrew Tate, I want to hear why. I'll hear you out, but I have questions. And do hit that like button before you go and make sure you're subscribed. And with that, we'll talk again soon.